When data flows through the veins of any enterprise powered by the cloud at its heart, it enables growth. But in business, growth is never by mere chance, but the result of forces working together. India's healthcare sector is witnessing a digital first growth unlike any other, driven by a confluence of factors spanning the need for telemedicine solutions due to pandemic lockdowns to automation solutions for preventing clinician burnout. Now, from big hospital chains to pharma companies, and now a vibrant startup ecosystem brimming with ideas, every player in this ecosystem is exploring new ways to leverage the cloud to drive positive outcomes for patients and drive sustainable growth. But achieving those goals, that requires a plan of action to make data work for the enterprise. So today, we dissect some unique growth stories in the healthcare ecosystem to reveal how digital capabilities have fundamentally transformed the relationship between patients and providers. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and joining me on Money Control Innovation Next, presented by Google Cloud, to talk about thinking beyond traditional health systems are a host of industry leaders with different specialities in the healthcare space. So let me quickly introduce them to you, starting with Dr. Nilesh Shah, President and Chief of Science and Innovation at Metropolis Healthcare; Deepak Chopra, Head of Women's Healthcare in Biozydus and Lead of Digital Initiatives; Dr. Anil Parikh, President of Medical Affairs and Clinical Research at IPCA Laboratories; Dr. Charit Bhograj, founder of Tricog Health; Rajiv Sikka, CIO at Medanta Medicity; and Sundar Pelapur, Head of Customer Engineering, Conglomerates and Emerging Businesses for India and SAARC at Google Cloud. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. And as we assemble on the operating table, let's diagnose the patient, because the healthcare sector, while it holds a lot of promise, there are still some gaps. And one of the biggest challenges, Sundar, when it comes to healthcare data is data silos. Just to set the context, your radiology or histopathology departments, for example, they might store data in a certain format, but hospitals could also be using the HL7 format, which predates the internet. So the challenge is in bringing these silos of data into a single interoperable format, which can sort of speak the language of APIs and ML and analytics. So Sundar, take us through the business impact when healthcare organizations can successfully make their data interoperable.
So let me talk about the challenges that typical organizations face when they're looking at data silos, for example, right? So typically you have your systems of record, which record transactions, which could be ERP systems, billing systems, invoicing systems, and then I think in healthcare the problem is compounded by the fact that you have medical images, you have prescriptions, you have room occupancy, and all of that to take care of, right? So the challenge that really hospitals and healthcare providers are faced with is twofold. One is, how do you bring all of this data together, and especially with the fact that you rightly mentioned HL7 and some of the histopath and medical imaging data that's very, very old in terms of format. And how do you have a uniform access to that data when you bring in the other data with it, which is, for example, the ERP data and hospital management data, for example, right? So there are two objectives that we stare at. One is to improve patient outcomes, and the other is to look at how seamlessly I can run my business, right? So what we think is the future is to create sort of an API layer on top of all of this to ensure seamless access. And I think we are also working very closely with systems of record, with standards like FHIR in order to enable that access, right? I think the real problem for us is to look at all of this in a holistic manner, to bring all of this data together in the same vein, so as to get better outcomes. Let me give you an example, right? So how do I find out what my room occupancy looks like versus the kind of patients that are walking in today? Do I have a uniform view of that? How do I improve outcomes for my patients post discharge, right? Do I have an accurate summary of their EMR? Obviously, we still are at a very nascent stage in terms of EHR. We don't really have a well-developed vision there, but I think we're getting there, right? I think that's a real challenge, data silos. And once we start to break them down, I think a uniform access layer that's built on top of this in the form of, let's say, APIs, which are kind of the industry standard now. I think that's the way I see the future going towards, and I think that will enable a lot of better outcomes for everybody.
Absolutely. Adding that API layer, it seems like you have a nurse for the patient who helps them recover while the kind of doctor does their magic. Let's get into use cases to kind of understand how this transformation works. So, Dr. Shah, let me bring you in. The diagnostic space that has seen major transformation happen since 2020. So, as Metropolis Healthcare looks to expand over the next 3 years and sort of deepen its presence in tier two and tier three cities, I want to understand from you the sort of investments that you'll be making to make in digital technologies to sort of improve your internal processes and increase productivity. And more importantly, as Sundar said, it's about the business, it's about the patients. How will all of it tie in to drive positive patient outcomes and experiences? Your story of growth and patient centricity, Dr. Shah.
Gautam, I am from the time where patient never used to make decision for ordering the test, selecting the lab, to the today's world where patients have started making the decisions. They want to understand, they want visibility, they want accessibility, and so on. So we have worked very hard in ensuring that at patient level, we bring lot of personalization, customization, give them lot of access, give them lot of visibility, and also gyan, which is required by them. So in the olden days, if doctor has written a prescription, patient would blindly follow and come to the lab, can do these tests without even understanding. Today's patient is different. They want to know why these tests are ordered, where I have to go, how this test is going to make difference to us, and so on. Now, I understand as a laboratorian, we have some limitations to talk about, but at least to some level of comfort, I think it's a time we need to give. So we have created various tools up to patient app where patient has access to our tests and services both. They can actually online order it, they can book the slot, they can talk about some personalization. Okay, I want a particular phlebotomist to come, I want a particular allergy to be taken care of, and so on. At times they can ask for some emergencies where they say a particular test of report I want early, and so on. Even our report formats and everything are getting redesigned to make it patient friendly, so at least they understand basics of the report. So doctor is a final master to take a call, but when it comes to health checkups and some of other tests which are lifestyle disease tests, they want to understand why and how my tests are behaving. Also for chronic illness patients like diabetic want to know how my result trend is moving. All this information was too difficult to get, but in today's digitalization world, and we are working, investing in big way in that, I think they are getting much more visibility on that, and that is creating a lot of satisfaction for patients.
Absolutely. And I wonder if there's upselling opportunities as well, because while, say, a patient while it would get, say, basic information or analysis of their diagnosis, maybe there is a use case there to give a second opinion, a basic second opinion, which could be automated and personalized at scale. We'll explore more such use cases as we go along. But focusing on the challenges, Rajiv, I want to bring you in because the challenge, while technology is opening many doors in terms of new patient experiences, the question still lies of manpower shortage. Because looking at some of the data, the density of active health force in India, health workforce rather, is estimated to be a little over one fourth of the WHO recommended threshold of 44.5 skilled health workers per, say, 10,000 persons required for achieving that universal health coverage and sustainable development goal. So, and I was reading in the papers, even the former vice president of India, he emphasized on this issue of workforce shortage in the healthcare sector in a speech last year. Now, considering, say, traditional classroom training methods, they involve a significant amount of time. How do you see technology in the cloud sort of playing a role in resolving this problem?
Sure, you said it very, very rightly. So this shortage is not just of the doctors. This is there for nurses, technicians, paramedic staff, flabo, for each and everyone. And this shortage is not there in pockets of the country, but each and every district of the country. So traditional classrooms and trainings is not going to work. So the only solution is that think digital and do digital. So what I mean by this is that remember that. Guru Dronacharya was only for Pandavas, while what we need is that someone who can train many Eklavya's. So I think metaverse in this particular case is a potential, yet in the early stages, has potential to train many Eklavya's across the country. I'll give you a simple example of a neurosurgeon training. Now, typically when neurosurgeons do a surgery, pre-operative planning is very important. So in this case, what they do is that they read 2D images, which is nothing but your scans, CT, MRIs. Their experience and skills transform those 2D images to a 3D environment, and that's how training is carried out. And this is now purely a function of the skills and experience of a surgeon. You don't have a scale. So what we do is that using a typical metaverse to VR, we can transform these 2D videos, which are CT, MRI, angios, into a 3D image, and pre-operative planning can be done fantastically. There are multiple examples, I can rattle it. So only way by which we can move to the scalability which we need. Otherwise, it will take decades and decades, and the gap is going to increase. So we have to bring tech into picture, and one such potential tech is metaverse.
Absolutely. Metaverse and VR, and these don't appear to be on the fringe. I'm glad to see that these proof of concepts are becoming more and more real and more driven by the outcome of patient centricity rather than, say, technology for technology's sake. And that's the emerging theme which is coming out. We've heard the diagnostics provider, we've heard the hospitals. Let's get the pharma part of the value chain to comment on some of the use cases which are coming up, being enabled by technology. Deepak, let me bring you in. Looking at the sort of enterprise level, can you give us some use cases on how technology enables you to be more patient centric, despite being, say, predominantly B2B operations? Because in some of my previous discussions, I've heard how sales and marketing teams were able to connect with their customers using the power of the technology. But I want to take it a level forward as to how do all these measures help the end customer become more knowledgeable, become more aware of the products that they're using.
Right. So, Gautam, digital transformation journey for pharma industry has certainly begun, even though it was slow. But I think the pandemic has actually accelerated the whole journey. And when I say so, it is both at the internal pharma industry level and also with the external stakeholders. So what we are doing now is basically we are not putting the product or any digital tool at the forefront, but we are trying to put the needs of the patient first before anything. And as I always keep on saying that being in pharma industry, we do not know our consumers, but of course we know our customers, because our customers are our doctor, HCPs, healthcare providers, and the consumer is the patient who ultimately kind of takes the medicine. So what we have done is we have started initiatives in multiple channels. A at the patient level, B at the HCP level, C at even the pharmacy level. And what we have done is we have initiated a lot of digital tools. We have done a lot of training. The first and foremost, the journey started with kind of identifying the needs, because just for transforming into digital doesn't make any sense until unless you deliver some value to the stakeholders. So having said that, so we have come up with a lot of patient care programs, which we deliver it to the patient, absolutely customized to the patient's need. It is not that one size would fit all. For example, in the women's healthcare space, every patient who is suffering from PCOS doesn't have the same requirement or doesn't require the same kind of a treatment and counseling. Similarly, for endometriosis, which is a kind of very strong chronic disease, every patient would behave differently. Every patient would require different medication and different kind of a treatment and counseling. So what we have done is we have made customized patient care programs, which we deliver it to the through the HCP to the patient, so that the stickiness, the connect between the patient and the doctor remains even after the consultancy is over. So I'm not starting with telemedicine, which pandemic actually kind of accelerated the whole teleconsult, but things have gone beyond that. One example I mentioned about patient care programs. Second, we designed customized digital learning platform for pharmacists so that they can also add value to the patient rather than just delivering or dispensing the medicine. Yeah. So these are the couple of examples. Apart from we spreading a lot of education and awareness through our social media channels, like for example, we have Bear for Health, where actually we try to empower the patient with a lot of right kind of a knowledge, not only to the patient but also to the caregivers, so that they can come talk to the HCPs and exactly know the right thing and the right management. So these are the few examples, Gautam, which we have initiated, and we have also kind of collaborating with a lot of digital tech companies, because digital technology is not our expertise. So we realize the importance of partnering and collaborating with experts to deliver a lot of digital tools which will help patient not only in the hospitals and the chambers of the doctor, but at home as well.
Absolutely. And that's the wonderful thing about the ecosystem today and the technology maturity levels, because we are operating in a sort of a plug and play world where you have your core competency, but you also have the ability to sort of connect with partners, technology partners, to take care of that side of the equation while you focus on using that technology to deliver the right outcomes. Point taken. Let me expand the conversation and bring Dr. Parikh in. Dr. Parikh, I'm not going to ask you a technology related question, but I will set the context for what Ipca Laboratories does, because it is a fully integrated Indian pharmaceutical company that manufactures, say, over 350 formulations, I believe, and 80 APIs for various therapeutic segments. So your value chain, it generates a lot of data, and you leverage that in use cases ranging from lab automation and quality management to process optimization of your in-house core ERP. But the question I want to ask you, and this is something which you mentioned earlier, is the therapy gap that still exists between clinical and the API side. So I want to understand from you, how can that be bridged to ensure patient centricity?
When you want to innovate, you should have a disease insight as well as a disease therapy insight. So when we uh, talk about therapy insight, means the products which are used to manage that disease or to treat that disease. So so you have to know the disease as well as the treatment used or the drugs used to treat that or manage that disease. So for that, you need to know the existing treatments which are available uh, to in the clinical practice to treat the patient, and you need to find out what is the gap in this area. So you need to find the therapy gaps. So it is important that just knowledge of disease alone is not sufficient. Knowledge of just drugs alone will not do, because in pharma industry, people who are coming from the chemistry background, they are in the uh, API research, you can say, so called. Uh, and those who are in the pharmaceutic side, they have a pharmaceutics or formulation R&D. So the disease angle is often not there in the pharma industry, Indian pharma industry. So that disease angle will come from the medical side. So so you have, when you have knowledge of both disease and the drugs used, then you can then you can uh, find out the therapy gaps which are there, and then you suggest your innovation around that. So this will help us in doing that, and I have been able to do that to an extent, some extent in my current job profile, and we have been able to do that.
I understood the point of the fact that India serves as a sort of a laboratory for much of the developing world, and that MNC template cannot be sort of copy pasted. And that's an important point, because it also brings up the possibilities that are coming about. I mentioned earlier about a sort of a vibrant ecosystem. Guess what, viewers? Those startups, which I spoke about, they're becoming large firms right now. And one of those is Tricog. So, Dr. Charit, I'll bring you in for this. Tricog is now one of the world's largest predictive healthcare analytics firms. So looking at your list of products, your flagship cloud connected product, Insta ECG, that can interpret and analyze an ECG report within 10 minutes, your Insta Echo that uses AI for diagnosis of heart disease, while your Deep Rhythm platform has been developed for real-time patient monitoring. So I want to know from you, how do you make data and the cloud work for you by overcoming, say, data quality issues in creating such products to improve patient experience?
Here is an important aspect that most people have not realized as yet, that today we are living in an ecosystem where healthcare is being distributed. And that happens when we are able to do acquisition of data remotely about patients, about their well-being, send all this data to the cloud, and use all the tools and technologies that have been built by our counterparts in the non-healthcare vertical use all of that innovation from cloud to ML to advanced computing to provide outcomes to that patient. And this loop where you are able to provide an outcome to the patient leads to far more data being generated. And that is a precursor for one of the most important aspects, that 65 to 75% of everything that is done in a large hospital setting today or a healthcare setting today can be distributed or from the hospital to the home, where these products and services can be delivered not just far more efficiently, but at a much lower cost. And the key outcome in using all of this data to the cloud is the fact that you are not just improving patients' outcome and reducing the quality of care, but also you are ideally managing chronic diseases. And as you mentioned, the key aspect is getting data, highly accurate data, into the cloud all together and letting the wonderful algorithms do their work in not just predicting, but also preventing diseases and improving outcomes for the patients.
Absolutely. And you've hit the nail in the head, because I'm especially interested in the preventive aspect, whereby you reduce healthcare costs by preventing that disease from coming early on. And technology has a role to play there as well, with many use cases for AI and ML emerging. But Sundar, let me get you to respond to what Dr. Charit said. Have we just scratched the surface here in terms of the role that technology, AI and ML plays in the continuum of care, now that more hospitals are sort of getting their digital act together? And on that note, what are the challenges that you foresee in the sort of post-pandemic world for the healthcare space, and the ways that data can drive positive outcomes from here on?
I frankly think the first place to start is the amount of information that we have today at our disposal, right? So I think the first challenge is in dealing with that. But if you look at the way we are positioned today, right? I think India is on a great journey towards digitizing this as well, right? If you look at some of the other markets, for example, in the UK, where the National Health Service has some sort of EMR mandated for patients, and from the recent studies that I looked at, 94% of patients have some form of EMR or the other, right? And we are getting there, right? And if you look at our other industries like banking or financial services, for example, we see that digitization in India is obviously, we're leading there. We're not even trailing in any sense, right? Look at the number of payments that we have risen to, right? Simply the volume of payments made through UPI or something. So obviously we are not as a country averse to digitization on these aspects, right? I think it's just a matter of time until we digitize to a larger extent in the healthcare space as well. I think some of the challenges that we might encounter, which obviously the cloud and we are hoping to solve, is of course how do I make sense of the large volume of data that I have, and like you rightly pointed out, improving patient outcomes is one aspect, but preventive is also another aspect, right? Where I need to churn massive amounts of data just to find out any anomalies that lie in the data sets, right? And I believe cloud, sort of vessel for doing that. So that's my take on how we sort of solve for the future in terms of cloud, in terms of volumes of data. We're actually looking at digitizing even handwritten prescriptions, for that matter, right? Just to make sure that we at least are contributing towards the creation of more and more EMR data points.
Absolutely. And taking forward that conversation on prescriptive and preventive medicine, I also want to understand the sort of CX aspect of it, how customer interactions or other patient interactions have changed with all players in the ecosystem. Because with the advances in telemedicine, I want to understand, let's say from Rajiv and Dr. Charit, since both of you work closely in this, is the biggest paradigm shift enabled by technology going to be a more decentralized approach with remote or home-based care using sensors and devices, and hospitals sort of being reserved for surgeries, or acting as a command center using cloud-based solutions for remote monitoring and analysis of patients? Rajiv, let's start with you. How is your enterprise sort of geared for this shift to minimum care in hospitals and maximum care at homes?
So Gautam, you have to hear a story from me on this. Way in the phase one of the wave one, when government of Delhi and central government decided that asymptomatic patient or mildly symptomatic patient can be treated at home, and they can be given a 21 days treatment away from the hospital. And that was like totally new to all of us. And we were not aware. This announcement came on Saturday. And by Monday, we were ready with the portal by which we started treating tens and thousands of patients away from the hospital. And cutting the story short, so one mega learning for us is that, care away from the hospital is the new norm, which has to be taken care. At that time when we started, within 48 hours, it was small steps, ensuring that patient care is taken with respect to SpO2 because that was the norm of the day, temperature and stuff like that, BP, sugar levels and other stuff. But slowly we realized that during the pandemic, Dr. Charitan took an example of ECG. A lot of people with heart problems or cardiac issues were not having, proper ECG done either in the neighborhood clinics or in the hospital, but they were, scared to come to a hospital. So we started, leveraging small remote ECGs, which were FDA approved, 6-lead ECGs, not 1-lead ECGs. And within 30 seconds, ECG is done in a very smooth fashion. It's a very easy job. And within 1 minute, ECG is there in the Medanta cardiac heart station, where consultants 24/7 are reading the ECGs, and it has a AI built in, which means that it says that don't worry, everything is okay. Second stuff, it says that yes, there is some doubt, so please book a consult with your cardiologist or come to an OPD whenever it is convenient. Third is that it's a serious rush to an ER wherever you are. So what's happening is that patients started realizing that for an ECG I don't have to plan, I have to come, and most of the time these ECG were not taken care. So all of these journeys gave us a lot of confidence. I'll give one more example. ICU doctors were in shortage, and there were so many patients in the ICU because of the COVID. And what we started doing is that this was already there. Ventilator, infusion pumps, and a lot of devices which are there. We started capturing all that information in a typical cloud in a Hadoop cluster, and all of those information coming in a typical waveform. The same waveform which you see on the bedside monitor was there on the handheld device in the hand of a doctor or an ICU expert. So the guy doesn't have to sit in the ICU. Guy doesn't have to sit 24/7 in the hospital. Guy could be anywhere at any time whenever duty doctor get an alert. He just, in case he needs further consultation from the senior doctor, he doesn't have to rattle each and every parameter. Senior doctor at home also get the same alert. He sees each and every graph and direct the doctor on the duty what to do. So these were all possibles because of the IoT devices capturing information almost on a real time and on a continuous basis. Per bed, per day, we were capturing 20,000 parameters, and we are still capturing it. And through remote devices, through connectivity, we were posing in a handheld device. And that's what give us solid foundation that future of the care definitely would be away from the hospital. And that's the foundation on which we are working. In last 2.5 years, we have opened 30 clinics, which are small clinics in various RWAs, where we do remote monitoring and remote care.
Absolutely. And it's expanding that ecosystem as well as more solutions like these, as you mentioned very well, Rajiv. As in, it's the ultimate comfort zone for patients. They can get the same services they do at the hospitals in the comfort of their home, and the doctor can monitor them effectively. What more could you ask? But it also sets up all these use cases, which I already talked about with Dr. Charit. Dr. Charit, are you seeing more interest coming from, say, hospitals to use Insta ECG, Insta Echo, and all these services as the thinking around healthcare itself shifts to minimum care in hospitals and maximum care at homes?
Absolutely, Gautam. And I just wanted to build up on something that Rajiv sir said so beautifully, is that the fact that we have some of the best dronacharyas in our country. The problem is that dronacharyas are only there in the hospital. What we need is technology that can virtualize these dronacharyas, so that instead of they're treating or teaching 10, 20, 30 patients, they're able to do 10,000, 100,000 patients. The fact that we are now living in a distributed healthcare era is being now coming to the forefront of lots of hospitals. Some of them, like my colleagues here, have taken early steps and they are the early adopters. And they realize that this is where the future is heading towards. The acceleration of technology and the adoption not just from the hospital side, but also from a consumer side, is that their expectations of healthcare is now being matched by what they are getting, for instance, in the banking sector. In other simpler things like ordering food or groceries, can we match that same consumer experience in healthcare, at least for minor things? The answer is absolutely yes. And I do believe that until COVID, the doctors have been, and me including, have been an important roadblock to adopting these technologies. But COVID has been an eye opener to all of us. So shifting the burden outside of large hospitals down to the care of the patients at their home is here to stay. And hospitals, those who will be the early adopters will be the winners as we go forward. The other point that you mentioned, for instance, is our ability to predict and prevent. This is being applied using our own platforms, where today we are able to not just monitor patients post discharge for serious conditions like heart failure, but also prevent those who will deteriorate rapidly and require readmission, so that the hospital team can then intervene and make sure that those patients remain at home and healthy and do not need to come into the hospital. This will go a long way to not just improve the health of the patients, number one, but also their interactions with the healthcare system, and on the long term, improve the quality of delivery of care and revenues for the healthcare as well.
Absolutely. And it's affordable for them. They won't make any mistakes in terms of admission or readmission, which could prove to be costly. So it saves costs for the patient as well. Dr. Shah, let me bring you in to expand on this, on these points that Dr. Charit and Rajiv have mentioned. It seems like a retail-like experience is coming in healthcare, which is good and actually great in terms of accountability. So I want to understand from you, how does technology help you to improve your value proposition to customers, especially if they demand a more retail like experience, and commodify your business, which then leads to price competition pressures and subsequently cost cutting?
So I'll start with something which we do it inside the lab, and something I want to talk about outside the lab. And ultimately it benefits patients as well as doctors. For me, there are two customers, patient as well as doctor, and we need to satisfy both. So, objective of digitalization and automation specifically is improve quality, improve efficiency, and cut down the cost. These are the three pillars on which we work. Inside the lab, fortunately, there is a lot of innovation happening, where you have automated machine which is AI driven, right from there to total lab automation, where we talk about sample sorting to quality assurance to running of the test and authorization validation step happening automated, brings huge efficiency, the productivity is high, and so on. Moreover, on top of that, the doctor's importance, where doctor has to make decision of releasing the report. There is lots and lots of happening, where we are able to set the rule. The doctor's work has been taken by AI. Today, my auto authorization, where without doctor report getting generated, is reaching near 50%, but our goal is 75% above. And by doing this automation, the quality, efficiency, everything improves. It's not there is any compromise. In fact, it improves, and doctors have more free space to do something even more valuable. So this is the path on which inside the lab automation is moving. What I'm looking forward to is outside, which will ultimately touch the patient and my doctors in bigger way. Outside, what I find is there is no integration amongst healthcare providers, and this is something which is looking forward to. And even government of India has initiated few things. There is no even standardization of codes today. A complete blood picture is called CBC somewhere, CBP somewhere, blood routine somewhere, liver function test. The profile contents are different in Bombay, different in Andhra, and different in Kerala. I think this standardization of test codes, profile contents, everything is very important. And beyond that, what becomes important is all this GAN and data which is coming out. Somewhere it gets integrated, so patient as well as doctor has direct access just from patient name, number, ID, or Aadhaar card, whatever we future decide. They get full information about patient's health, records coming up, which is still we have not even scratched the surface. This is something which is looking forward for to real make difference for patient. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, time now to connect all the dots which Dr. Shah, Dr. Charit, and Rajiv mentioned about this new experience, new CX of healthcare. And Sundar, let me bring you in for that. What are the strategies necessary for implementing a robust, secure cloud framework in healthcare, which will drive this major shift from that traditional healthcare model to the digital healthcare model in future, while also addressing the triple burden of disease in India, which includes accessibility of infrastructure, accessibility of finance, and more importantly, accessibility of human resources?
I think, like you rightly said, it's a triple prong problem that we have to address, right? India has a high disease burden, and with our population the way it is, I think we need to really look at technology help in order to solve for this, right? So let me address, accessibility of infrastructure. Now, obviously, it's very important for us to look at how patient care is delivered. I think one way where technology can help is point out the right hotspots for people to visit, to get better care through unbiased reviews and such. And I think we're helping a lot in that area as well. The other point is, how do we reduce the cost of finance for healthcare? Now, it's either reduce cost of finance or better access to finance for, let's say, healthcare event. Now, I think we're seeing this increasingly where, and I think we jump on that bandwagon pretty soon in India as well, where you look at the better, healthier lives you lead, the lesser the cost for insurance, the cost for finance for you is, right? So consequently, there are programs that let you, wear simple wearables that track how healthy you're living, what you're eating, so on and so forth, and look at parameters to really bring down the cost of insurance, right? I think this one way where we can actually address the cost of finance, and on an ongoing basis to also look at expanding that portfolio, because I see almost 8 and 10 people now strapping on some sort of wearable or the other, right? So I think there is tremendous value to be unlocked in terms of data that it brings in, and consequently the kind of right access that you can get as a result of you sharing that data. And obviously that brings me to the next problem, which is once you share data, how am I going to secure it, right? How am I going to have the right people access it in the right context? I think both of these are top of mind when we talk about healthcare data specifically. And I think regulations being on one side of the spectrum, we need to choose the right technology provider, which will let you actually share data in the context of who's accessing it for what purpose, and once they've done that, what happens to that data and how is it, either records are retrieved or stored or disposed of, however the case may be. I think it's very important to choose the right cloud provider to do this, and I think we've proven time and again. Forrester research just showed us that we are on a cloud native security aspect, we are the top in that segment, as well as looking at data security, right? And we've got a lot of cloud native tools to help organizations in healthcare address both of these requirements, whether it's storage, processing, or retrieval of that data, and subsequently the audit that we need to comply with, right? So I think it's important that technology helps us in both ends of the spectrum here.
All right, now that we have covered that conversation, as we head into the last leg of this talk, let's also understand how the enterprise itself needs to gear up to foster that innovation culture across every level of an organization, to encourage, say, cross-functional collaboration, and more importantly, position data analysis as a sort of a core competence. Deepak, your thoughts on this?
Prime Minister this Independence Day that this decade is a decade basically because we have around more than 650 million internet users in the country, who around 450 million users on social media. So yes, so innovation and digital initiatives definitely needs to be integrated. And we, as a pharma company, what we did, a couple of examples, especially post-pandemic, it was unprecedented for all of us. So what we thought, yes, how do we kind of give care to the patient at home? We heard Dr. Shah also speaking the same. So what we did, we trained and upskilled around more than 3,000 HCPs on our digital front. So we created a thought leadership at the digital level, so that the doctors are skilled enough to get connected virtually with their patients, treating them with using a lot of digital therapeutics, not only telemedicine alone, but also kind of advising a lot of consumer wearables and how do we do that? So the knowledge part also was very important. Upskilling part was equally important. Since our medical reps were not on the ground because of lockdown. So what we did was we collaborated with one digital organization where we could reach the doctors and close to 20,000 odd HCPs through tele rep program where the medical rep used to call upon the doctor through a link, had a video call, and so WhatsApp could have been a very easier way of connecting, but we thought this technology also would add to long term. So these were the few things, and of course at the back end, Gautam, many companies, including Bayer, are now kind of collaborating with a lot of startups for drug delivery and process automation, because Bayer as an organization is a huge multinational company. So, but the startups are quite agile. So, collaborating with them to come out with new drugs and at an earlier stage is as important. So, these are the few innovative examples what Bayer as an organization, a part of healthcare and part of pharma industry has initiated, and we are going stronger day by day.
Dr. Parikh, your thoughts on the steps taken, especially to kind of develop an innovation culture in your organization when we talk about patient centricity and the possibilities unlocked by technology?
Yeah, so patient centricity comes when we understand the disease and what are the patient's difficulty in that, what are the problems the patient is facing when he is using the current therapy, and how we can make that, manage his disease better. So that, keeping the patient's factor in mind. So when you consider the patient factor, you have to consider the disease burden which the patient is facing, and how currently you are managing that, and what are the difficulties, and how can you facilitate that, how can you manage the patient better. So a lot of technologies have come that can make it better. You have to have a patient interface, where the currently the doctor is overburdened, and then the patient is not explained how to manage his disease better. Particularly when you're talking about chronic diseases, the patient has to be involved in his own management, so that he knows how to control his disease better by using the drugs. What are the compliance issues? So that is, that becomes the patient centricity. Earlier, I think it was not there, but now in the research part also, the patient perspective is taken. Not only the clinician's perspective, but the patient's perspective is also taken into account. And you can interact with the patient and see what are the problems he's facing. So that becomes, patient's centricity, which becomes an important aspect in current research landscape.
All right, let me flip the script. We spoke about a workforce shortage, but on the other hand, there's also this aspect of while technology gives providers, healthcare providers, access to information, there could be an aspect of a lot of technology kind of causing clinician burnout, because much of the information is coming. Because while the dawn of the electronic health records that promise streamlined, accelerated healthcare delivery, that technology can also include burdensome alerts and documentation requirements. As we mentioned, it can lead to clinician burnout. So, Sundar, I want to understand from you, what are the use cases here where AI and automation is enabling a sort of a win-win situation from a patient and provider experience to reduce the burden of care?
Yeah, I think very, very pertinent point. We look at our population, we look at our statistics. I think we're very close to getting to the doctor to per thousand patient ratio mandated by WHO. In fact, I won't be surprised if we get there soon. But then, despite that having a huge disease burden, right, like I mentioned before, it's very, very important for us to see how technology can help us, right? And I think we're very well poised in that segment. And we heard our esteemed panelists talk about how they're using technology to improve outcomes, with small ECG machines, with instant results, so on and so forth. I think we're just getting started scratching the surface, really. But if you look at, how AI and ML can help, a couple of ways, right? First is, how can I look at a large volume of records? Let me give an example. Let's look at diabetic retinopathy, right? I think that's one of the leading causes of blindness. And as a population that's extremely susceptible to both cardiac and diabetic problems, I think this is a fantastic example to quote. If you look at a fundus scan, if you want to take an image of the retina, you need to go to an ophthalmologist. And I think it's going to be difficult for a lot of the population to find the right place to go to, plus the time allocated for each of your appointments, and simply the cost of going there, right? So can we, with technology, look at maybe a slightly lesser skilled person just operate the machine, take a fundus scan, and thousands of them, and with virtues of AI and machine learning, we're able to at least understand, if DR is an onset symptom, or do they really need intervention at the moment, right? And like our panelists spoke before, they clearly categorize it into three verticals: whether you're okay, whether it would be okay for you to visit the doctor at some point of time in the future, or whether it's an emergency and you want to take an intervention right now. So I think AI/ML is rightly poised to do that. It's about how you train the model, how you develop the model, what are the technologies at your disposal to achieve a very high success ratio with less error rates, right? So I think that is where we can bring this technology to the masses. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult for doctors to address the kind of population that we have, especially in a country as large as India with a population that's spread across so much, right? So I think in one sense, this is how AI and ML can really help.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time. So let me take that point forward that you mentioned, Sundar, and ask a question to anyone on the panel. Where do you see the next big disruption enabled by technology coming from in terms of transforming the way you operate in the healthcare space? And how do you see it driving positive outcomes for patients? Dr. Charit, maybe we could start with you on this.
Thanks very much.
And I see this in three very clear phases, and we are in only step one, where the goal here is to digitize the existing data and patient interactions that we have. The West has done a far better job. India is still lagging behind, and I'm sure that we are going to catch up very soon. And the minute we do digitization, we will then be able to do distribution, where diagnosis can be done centrally versus patients being remotely in any corner of the country. This is what Tricog has been doing over the last decade. Today, we are able to manage close to 9.5 million heart patients across the country because of this first step. The second important step, again, leads to your previous conversation, is that the tools and algorithms that even Sundar mentioned are designed not to replace the doctor, but to aid the existing doctors, so that we can scale the doctor's time to be able to reach such vast number of patients that are required from a smaller number of doctors that are there. There are 4,000 cardiologists such as me in this whole country of the size of India. So a lot of disparity between access to healthcare that is needed to be crossed. The third, and I think the most exciting step that I see in the future, is that the different devices that are there today are producing data and algorithms for the consumption of humans. But if you flip that around, the future will lie for data that is gathered for algorithms, and those will be able to produce much different and perhaps deeper insights than any human can. And that, to me, is an exciting time to be.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Charit. So Rajiv, coming to you, you mentioned metaverse and VR, but in terms of the next big disruption coming in, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So definitely, I clearly foresee four major disruptions through tech. One is definitely metaverse stroke VR. Second is AI, and everybody talked about AI. And we are also and for all of the fours, we have multiple examples within the production environment of Medanta. Third, according to me, is big data and IoT combined together, because big data in isolation will not be of much use, because devices which are throwing data, you can't capture it unless you have IoT attached to them. And the fourth is genomics. Why I'm saying genomics? See, diseases are there, medicines were there, treatment were there. With genomics, diseases will be more predictable, medicine will be more precise, and treatment will be more customizable. So these were the three attributes which will come to this. But overall, I think what we have to worry not is that where is my electronic medical record. We keep cribbing about it. The recent examples which we did in the AI has nothing to do with medical records. I'll give an example of neurosurgery planning. In this case, CT and MRI are directly taken from the modalities and put it in the AI algorithm to go to the VR to simulate the 3D model. Similarly, we already have a production environment in which we go to the remote districts and villages where we have a van, where we have a inbuilt X-ray machine. Directly from the X-ray machine, a report comes and an X-ray comes. So a report has the complete X-ray reporting, which is almost precise as a radiologist reporting it. So in this case, there is no direct attachment to my electronic medical record. Why I'm saying so is that we don't have to look for complete precision. See, three things which are bound to come in the healthcare. One, care away from the hospital. Second is mobility, because whenever we talk, so this is an example of mobility, either care away from the hospital. When you talk about during pandemic, we realize that isolation is very important. So isolation for me in the digital world is remote. Remote means mobility. Third thing, which according to me is going to make a major huge difference, is that done is better than perfect. You don't have to look for each and everything perfect. Maybe the ECG is not giving you MI, but it's giving at least AF. Is better than one lead ECG. Is better than doing nothing. So that's what we have to do. Just do, and it may not be perfect, but we move towards the perfection.
That's a great point that you mentioned. Done is better than perfect. Deepak, let me get you in for this summary thought from the pharma side, the next big disruption coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Gautam. So, Gautam, the next set of transformation we believe is when pharma companies tie up with this health tech companies, to provide an all-round health solution ecosystem where the doctor not only prescribes drugs but also manages the health with the help of technology, apps, and services. Also, having said that, and we are not just trying to see where technology would be very high tech for affordable class or people who live in the urban setup, but beyond that, beyond tier 2, tier 3 cities. So where your maximum population lies in India. So if we are able to touch them, empower them, treat them, manage them, probably that is one area where I think technology will be enabling healthcare system to further get strengthened. And secondly, we spoke about genomics. So Bio is in the forefront. A lot of R&D being done at the cell and gene therapy. So that is also one thing which will be a kind of things to be seen in next 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to all the exciting possibilities coming about. But getting the last word in from you, Sundar, the next big disruption from an enablement perspective, what will that be?
Yeah, I think technology is poised to do that. From an enablement standpoint, I think it's about empowering oneself, right? And just an interesting anecdote, right? I happened to visit a dermatologist, recently, and there was an interest on his doorstep which said, "Leave your shoes and your half-baked medical knowledge outside," right? And what I thought that was interesting because, I think somebody else pointed out this too, that a lot of people are more empowered now, but we need to understand that information in context of what you need to interpret it with, right? So half-baked knowledge is dangerous. How does technology intervene in order to better inform patients and doctors on the standard of healthcare, on how their disease is progressing, or what is the next intervention to take? I think that's a very important step that we need to take. That reduces friction in terms of healthcare, that improves better outcomes. And I think follow-up visits are lesser and lesser if you are better empowered to take decisions that are informed with the right kind of expertise, right? So I think that, in my opinion, is the biggest disruptor going forward. And I think there are ways and means of obtaining that information. And I think, again, like simple things like YouTube, right? Do we have verified sources that talk about, let's say a disease or a medicine or a formulation? I think that's the next standard, I believe.
Absolutely. Information in the right place, in the right time, and more importantly, in the right hands can make all the difference. But we have run out of time. On that note, it's time to wrap up our conversation around thinking beyond traditional health systems as part of our special series titled Money Control Innovation Next, presented by Google Cloud. I'd like to thank all the panelists for connecting the dots for us on how digital-first initiatives powered by the cloud are unlocking new possibilities for the healthcare sector. And of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Till next time, this is your host, Gautam Srinivasan, signing off. Have a great day.